Hi, I'm Karen Stever with Griffin's GGS Pro Technical Services Group. Today in this short webinar, I'd like to talk to you about edema and intumescence in your greenhouse plants. Edema is often spelled odema, also pronounced edema, and also it's often lumped together with intumescence. All of these are cellular disorders that occur in greenhouses. They lead to a bumpy growth. It typically occurs late fall into early to mid-spring, and certain species of plants, certain cultivars, certain genera are more susceptible to this occurring. And these disorders are caused by environmental conditions and not by disease. But the similarities in there between edema and intumescence. Edema is edema no matter how it's spelled. The short spelling with an E is now the most common, but in the old literature it's usually spelled with an O. We often lump these together as water relations, but we now know that that is not exactly true. Edema is edema, but intumescence is a different disorder. Intumescence is shown here. It's a more crystally growth and often on the top of the leaf. If you see it close up right there on the left, it doesn't necessarily look like plant tissue or normal plant cells. So intumescence and edema really are different. Intumescence is not a water relations problem. It's actually caused by low UVB light levels, at least in part. In intumescence, it's the epidermal cells that are affected. This disorder starts with just one or a small few cells that start to swell within the plant. It then grows on the outside of the plant to have this crystalline look, and it often follows the veins, as shown here in the New Guinea impatient on the right, or the chartreuse sweet potato in the center. On the blackie sweet potato on the left, we see the crystalline structure along the veins, but not just along the veins, all over. That may be a little bit of a different combination problem. Intumescence is not common on Calibrachoa, but here we see an example of it that came into our group from a customer. There are several known susceptibilities to intumescence: tomatoes, sweet potatoes, peppers, kale, New Guinea impatiens, Kufia, but in Kufia, edema can also be important, and Thunbergia can also suffer with intumescence as well as edema in some cases. So let's look at edema more closely. Edema is due to the water balance, the amount of the water being taken up versus what is being released through the stomates by transpiration. Edema is not affected by UV light, unlike the intumescence is. So you can't cure it by more UV light or prevent it or delay it. A large group of mesophyll cells, that's more interior cells, swell with edema. They swell with water and it forms this blister-like bubble that eventually the surface cells rupture on the plant. And that's what we're seeing here on the back of this leaf. Edema, not always, but most often occurs under the leaf with the true swelling and damaged tissue there. But on the top of the leaf, there will also be signs that can resemble other disorders that can look like thrips sometimes, or a botrytis ghost spot, or other disease or insect-related things that could be happening. If we look a little closer at those edema lesions, They usually occur on the lower surface, although not always, as I said, usually occurring between the veins. All of these lesions here are already broken and browning, and really there's nothing to be done about that at that point. Those lesions look like this. This is on the back of a begonia leaf. You see that they swell up. The tissue expands so much it basically dies. At the very far left, you see it cracking open, and then one of those lesions that has cracked open there. I mentioned that the upper leaf surface can show effects. Here we see something that we thought initially was thrips damage until we got a better picture that showed us both the top of the leaf, of this leaf, and the bottom of the leaf with the bumps here on these young alyssum plants. You'll see what it looks like. Another example of edema, in this case we said intumescence is common on the sweet potatoes, but this is a case of edema on the yellow sweet potato on the left and the Hoya on the right. You see on the Hoya that normally smooth leaf has an orange peel look to it. So both of that foliage of both of these plants is highly affected by the edema. It's super common in geraniums and cleome in the spring. Geraniums can get pretty ragged looking on the top of the foliage from the amount of damage on the bottom. In geraniums though, it's usually confined to the lower leaves, so we can clean those leaves off or outgrow it, change the conditions so we get out of the edema susceptibility mode, and with the geraniums will be fine. Cleome can fare a lot worse. You see here that it's not just on the older leaves. The plant is very highly affected, distorted foliage. It's going to take quite a while to grow out of that. Cleome, these are two of the most notable susceptible plants. Another plant susceptible to edema is the cassia, shown here. Tomatoes and peppers, begonias, we mentioned cleome, broccoli, cauliflower, and cabbage can be susceptible, and then some succulents are susceptible. So how can we prevent these disorders in our winter greenhouse? Well, for intumescence, it's provide the highest light levels possible. Plant-resistant cultivars, those have been researched and documented for the sweet potato cultivars. Space your plants so that they receive the highest possible UVB light down into the canopy, and keep the nutrition on track to keep the plant generally healthy. With edema, it's important to avoid extremes of wet-dry cycles, particularly in geraniums. It's known that the edema can be triggered by an extreme dry event followed by watering. Space the plants and provide good nutrition. Again, general health and light, but that spacing also increases the airflow and the light down into the canopy. That helps to reduce the humidity, which is the main problem with edema. And then plant-resistant cultivars. Again, ivy geraniums have been investigated and documented for resistance. Thanks. I hope you've learned a little bit about these physiological disorders, edema and intumescence, that you will be able to use in your own facilities. If you have any questions or comments, suggestions, please give me a call or send me an email. My contact information